Hey, I'm Jim Sear.
And I'm Jocelyn Yacht.
And you are listening to the Avoiding Chores podcast.
Where lately we've been talking a lot about movies and books.
Yeah, that's right, Jocelyn. And you know what? A couple episodes ago, me and Keith were talking about Stephen King, and I was looking up my library here, and looking at my Stephen King books I've kept over the years. But there's another set of books that I've kept, which are the Lord of the Ring books, Jocelyn. And I think, hopefully, you've read these books.
Well, have I read these books? Interestingly, today, as we're recording this on September 21st, it's the 80th anniversary of the publication of The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. And, it's interesting because that book was first written as a children's book. And it morphed and got transformed, I guess, afterwards with The Lord of the Rings into this grand, fantastical, amazing environment, I guess, and world that he created, and even created languages and so on. But it all started with that one book, and I still remember when I was a teen, and I would say I was probably 14, and that book got, it might have been its third or fourth life at the time, because obviously it was published in 1937, and it became popular again, and everybody was talking about it. And of course, I picked it up because I was a reader back then, and I started with that one. Interestingly, I read the French translation at the time.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It was, I read English, of course, but it just so happened that my buddy had a copy, and started reading it, and really, really, kind of gravitated towards it. I was a fan of Dungeons and Dragons and stuff like that at the time.
Yeah.
So this fit right in, right? And just kind of paralleled that universe. So it was a pretty cool thing.
Huh. Well, you know what? I didn't read the books until, basically when the movies came out. But I only was kind of aware culturally of Lord of the Rings. I briefly remember as a kid I saw the Bashki animated Lord of the Rings in the 70s. There was an animated, they rotoscoped
a lot
of the actions because it was very low budget. Yeah, you can still find it somewhere, I think on YouTube or something like that. I believe it was on a CBS movie or something like that. So, I kind of knew, and I was reading a lot of Mad magazines when I was a kid, so I saw Frodo Lives, like the button Frodo Lives, and I kind of was aware, didn't quite clue in what they were talking about. So it wasn't until, I guess, the first of the movies came out, and still didn't really got into it. Saw the first movie, and then my girlfriend at the time, she gave me the whole, prepackaged book set or whatever.
Right.
I just started devouring that books, and that was around Christmas time too. So, spending the holidays just reading these books and just processing it. And then plus, as the movies came out, watching the movies, and then you got the whole DVD series at the time and the extended editions.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
And oh my God, how many hours you just sit back and watch and just marveled at the world that got inspired by it. But you know what? Then that got me to kind of go back and buy The Hobbit, buy the Silmarillion, and try to complete that collection. Try to read it through. And I gotta say though, I kind of lost steam halfway through The Hobbit.
Oh, is that
after reading?
Yeah. It, the book you mean, or not, or the movie?
Yeah, the book. We can talk about the movies later. But having watched all the Lord of the Rings trilogy movies. Read all the books, loved the books. It was The Hobbit. I don't know. Maybe it was trying to remember all the names of the
dwarves.
Yeah, the dwarves and
the 9
and all
of
that
them.
Stuff. Yeah. So then after 3, I'm like, okay, this is too. I don't need a crib sheet to find out who's who in this when I'm reading this.
So. Well, it's interesting because your path is very different. The movies triggered reading the books for you, and for me it was quite the opposite, right? Because I first read the books in my teens, and by the time they announced that Peter Jackson was making those movies, don't forget when it was announced that those movies were coming out, I wouldn't say that Peter Jackson was a nobody, but he was not very well known.
Well, Peter Jackson had only one big movie, which was, I think, The Frighteners with Michael J. Fox.
Right, and even that wasn't a blockbuster by any stretch of the imagination.
Try to remember if you actually watched it or not when it came out, right?
But so it was announced, with all kinds of pomp and circumstance that Peter Jackson was making Lord of the Rings into movies, and my experience, having read a lot of books when I was a kid, and my experience with those books being made into movies was not that positive. Often movies take shortcuts because they don't have time to tell the entire story that's in a book, and often, if you've read the book before, you have a mental image of what that world is supposed to look like. And rarely will it get translated with your point of view onto the screen. Well, and I've talked to a lot of fans of Lord of the Rings, longtime fans, people that have read the books. Peter Jackson nailed it. He just nailed everything. And there are very few components of the books that he actually removed from the story. And I mean, at some point he had to condense some things. But honestly, the very few things that he removed were somewhat trivial and not really important to the story. So he did such an amazing job. But honestly, in the end, it's Tolkien's world, and to think that it's 80 years now since he published that first children's book, and that we're still talking about it in the era of podcasts, is quite remarkable.
It is quite the thing. It's quite the thing indeed, Jocelyn.
So you were talking about the fact that The Hobbit didn't quite interest you as much.
Well, you know what? So you just said, I'm just going to build on the last thing you said there, where Peter Jackson kind of nailed it. My experience, where I watched the original 3 trilogy movies first, and then read the books, or kind of read the books afterwards.